Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
Good morning, Melissa.
Hello, JJ.
We're laughing because we've been riffing on one of our favorite topics around kind of personality traits and kind of like how people's brains are naturally wired, right? And for whatever reason, we love this topic. Right? You've been working with personality assessments and talking to people about their sort of natural wiring for a long time.
Yes, and I'll even say the long time is like decades, even though I'm only 12.
I really like this topic because I feel that as soon as I started kind of learning about some of my natural personality traits, it really helped my self-awareness journey. So I think it's really helpful to talk about those things and explore, because it's kind of like I feel it's like a great place to start with self-awareness.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And for me, one of my dominant personality traits is introversion, which maybe if everyone is starting to gather is the opposite of Melissa's.
If they're not, this is we'll just put it right out there.
We'll just put it right out there.
Opposite. We're totally opposite.
So being a very introverted person and really a very introverted, quiet kid, as I started, doing more and more things and going to work events with lots of people or getting invited to parties and, engaging in these bigger social events, I always felt super awkward, right? Like I never liked it. I never liked going to a big party. I never liked going to a big event. It was always pretty stressful for me. And I never knew why. Like I always thought well, everyone else seems to like this party. Why don't I like this party? What's wrong with me? Right? There must be something wrong with me, because I don't like parties. And then people would say, oh, JJ, well, you're not very social, or, you're kind of like reclusive, right?
Reclusive. You bring your own lampshade to parties and it's really, really big and covers your whole face.
Right, exactly. Like I'll just stand in the corner here and hopefully no one will see me. But I was like,
so are you saying that you were judging yourself, that there was something bad because you didn't like to do these, like there's a lot of work events, for example, like.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have work. They were like literally parties that my own company was throwing, and I still felt uncomfortable. Right?
Wow.
Like I'm paying for this party, and I still don't want to be here.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I did have a lot of I had a lot of kind of shame. Like I felt like I should be, in some of those events, like I said, like the work stuff for sure. It's like I should be the life of this party, right? I should be I should be super engaged in it, and I'm just not. And I would watch other people have such a good time at these things. And I just like, why don't I? What's wrong with me? Right. And I felt this like something was wrong with me. I must have some deficiency around socializing or something. I felt really guilty about it, or maybe not guilty, like more like ashamed. Right.
Yeah.
Which did not help. Right. Because it just made me want to lurk back into the corner even more.
Yeah.
And that's until I took, a personality test and I started researching personality traits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Melissa, you said something that will stick with me forever, because my first personality trait assessment you and I did together. And when, it's a really simple questionnaire you fill out and you get this results back. And you said, okay, we're going to look at your personality traits, and this is just an is thing. It's just a natural wiring. There's no judgment about this.
Mm-hmm. And that's a famous, I love to say that it's not right. It's not wrong. It just is.
Yeah. And then when we started talking about like how my dominant trait of introversion would be, like shaping the way, I think and the way I interact, that was really powerful because I thought, oh, well, that's why I don't like these big events, right? And it's okay. And that's okay, right? And you actually like made it possible for me to be okay with that.
To get rid of the shame part of it, to get rid of the embarrassment or the self-judgment part of it, and just see it as an is thing.
Right. It just is, right? So now that it just is, and then I can accept it, then I can change the way I interact, in the world with that information. And that was really helpful.
Or certainly you won't feel like you're leaking energy with a lot of shame. Like you don't feel like there's something, like you have to spend a lot of your energy trying to make it okay or to try and get over. Like if I could just get over this.
Yeah. Yep.
What's interesting?
Now I happily go to parties of 2 people where I am one of them.
And you can be gone in 12 seconds.
And we have an agenda.
You know what I was just thinking about though? I don't know if I've ever told you this, but the very first time that you and I met together, just the 2 of us, it was right around the same time as this personality assessment stuff. And you asked me to go and meet you at a coffee shop. And, but you know what? It's funny. I remember when you asked me to go there, I sat down with a muffin. I bought a muffin at the coffee shop and a coffee, and you were there ahead of me. And I remember feeling, because I'm an extrovert, so I remember feeling like, okay, I can see by his body language that he is an introvert. Like I could see you kind of fidgeting in your chair, and it was like you were looking down, you had a pen ready to go, like you
can see the introversion a mile away.
Yeah. And I study personalities, so I could see it even more. But here's what's really interesting about that. I'm an extrovert. So I felt instantly responsible in that exchange to make you feel comfortable. Like I felt like I had to bridge the gap. And so I remember saying to you, do you want half of this muffin? Right? And we didn't even know each other. And you said, oh, I don't eat that. And I remember, but here's the thing about that is that while you were busy being in your introversion and judging yourself, I was in my extroversion and judging myself. Because by doing that, I felt that I had made you uncomfortable. And I felt bad about that. Like I felt like, oh my gosh, I just overstepped. There I am again. I always do that.
Yeah.
So here I was in that same process of making judgments about myself in the completely opposite way.
Isn't that crazy? Like how 2 people were we were both kind of in our own heads, right?
Yeah.
Trying to, just based on something as simple as like our natural wiring.
Yeah. And, not just talking about like how we show up, like what you're talking about is this personality trait of extroversion, right? That's measured in the opposite of that would be more introspective or more quiet. We use the words extroversion and introversion. Sometimes I try to actually avoid those words because they could be so much more, right? It's just on the extroversion side, It's like the social connection, like feeling like you get your energy from people. On the opposite of that would be a more analytical person or someone who gets more energy from tactical things or working on projects and that sort of thing. So that's one. But, the other thing I was thinking about is there's a lot of other personality traits that we have yet to talk about. And just as an example, when we were in this discussion this morning, I was thinking about like a person's speed or their pace, which is measured, like in a personality trait of patience. And when you talk about having a lot of something or not having a lot of something, this patience construct is a really interesting personality trait to think about too, as it relates to self-awareness, because I remember being in this business for as long as I have a great girlfriend who's a high-level coach, and she was building her own assessment tool and has since built a big company actually around this tool. It's really cool. But I was taking that assessment tool and the results came back. I was one of her guinea pigs, so it was really early on. But the results came back that I had 0 patience. Now, that's actually true.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of patience.
It's true. We didn't even need to do an assessment to know that.
Right. But I remember looking at her and she had these big blue eyes and she's from the South and just a wonderful, caring person. But I was looking at her and I felt my whole body get hot. I broke out in a sweat and I was like, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed by this. And my emotional reaction.
You're embarrassed by kind of the assertion that you're not patient, right?
Yeah.
Because generally, it's like sometimes that's not. You're right. Like if I say that person is not very patient, that's not like a good.
It's not a good thing. And in the assessment world, we are very much in the framework of saying what someone has, not what they don't have. So even in this topic, I would never say to somebody, you don't have any patience. What I would always say is, you have a really high sense of urgency.
Yeah.
But a lot of that came from because I felt when in my own head, I heard, you don't have any patience, Melissa.
Yeah.
And the reason I got embarrassed about it was, while I don't have a lot of patience at all for things like processes and a lot of details I'm not interested in, I could not care less. Like, I just want to get them done. But when it comes to people, I have a lot of patience. Mm-hmm. So I was warring inside with this, like, oh my gosh, like, how do I show up? What a jerk.
Yeah. Like you don't want other people to think like you don't have time for them. Right. Or you want to move on to the next thing or you're uninterested, because that's not what your true intention is.
Exactly.
But just kind of how you're wired maybe makes you come across that way sometimes.
Yeah. So it is interesting. Like when we talk about self-awareness and as it relates to personality traits, I don't really feel as though personality traits will not solely get you to self-awareness at all. Like,
no, I agree.
Like for example, you could compare a highly extroverted person, like, I mean, a real talker. Okay. You could compare somebody who was a real talker in meetings. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if you had somebody who talked and talked and talked and talked, and they had no self-awareness that they were doing it, and they were not picking up the social cues of other people around them to stop talking, right? You could take someone like that versus someone who had that same trait, a real talker that has a lot of self-awareness. And they would not exhibit in the same way. They'd be much more inclined to choose wisely when they were going to talk, even if it was killing them and they wanted to talk all the time.
Mm-hmm. So it isn't, like we said earlier, I think understanding your own personality and your own natural wirings is a really nice first step into self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of them, you can see really easily, when you interact with other people pretty quickly, as soon as you start looking for those little cues, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And when you start looking within yourself, like for me, it was not an external thing. It really started as an internal. Why do I feel bad in these particular situations?
Right. And it's funny because exactly like you're saying is like a personality traits of people are much easier to spot than how self-aware they are.
It's true. Yeah.
In a work setting, so as a coach, I could go into a room, and I still do this, right? Like I wade gingerly into the water when I am first working with someone new, because if I'm going to be their coach and I know whatever title there is, like let's say they're the business owner or they're the CEO of a bigger company or whatever. Okay. You can make certain assessments about what you think they're going to be like based on their position at work, based on how they walk into a PTA meeting, how they come to a family reunion. I mean, you can make certain assessments about body language and how someone shows up. However, if you have somebody who is like, for example, somebody who has a high level of assertiveness in their personality, okay? But you still can't necessarily tell how self-aware they are.
Right.
And so I might say something, like I might just have a general discussion with somebody at first to try to see if they have an awareness, what their level of emotional intelligence or self-awareness actually is. And, somebody can come off just very blunt and just call it like it is and not really care if you like what they're saying or not. And then you might say to them, well, do you know that you kind of come off like this? A highly self-aware person will go, yeah, of course I do. Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, but that's just the way it is. That's how it has to be.
And that's how I like it.
And that's how I like it. But then somebody who is not highly self-aware that has that same level of authority may have people walking around them, hiding from them, not feeling safe around them, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
They don't even know it. They think that it's just fine.
Yeah. So do you find like in your coaching work that working with people on some of this natural wiring stuff and kind of helping them navigate is a good foray into self-awareness?
I do.
Do you sometimes like use that as an on-ramp to self-awareness?
Yeah. And it's so funny because a lot of the times I feel like this pressure because I'm in a business environment. I feel this pressure I used to actually, I don't anymore. I used to feel this pressure to just keep it business related, just keep it related to the office, related to your behavior at your workplace and that sort of thing. But now I'm much more aware of the fact that we are whole people. Mm-hmm. We are who we are. And so the questions that I ask people now, I don't care if you are a stay-at-home working person, if you are a parent that has the inside work of the household as your job, whether you have a big corporate job, whether you work in a little startup. I don't really care what you're doing on the outside. That to me is not nearly as important as the feelings that you have on the inside. Like, are you in alignment? Do you feel really content with what you are doing? Do you feel really content with how you are interacting with people, how you respond to people? How do your actions and your words match what your feelings are? Because that's really where the gap is. The personality traits, I think, just make it more obvious and bigger out there for all of us to be able to recognize. Yeah. Yet these deep feelings that we have inside of us, these are the things that really drive our level of contentedness, satisfaction, and happiness.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. It'd be interesting to hear other people's stories around this topic. I'd love for people to share, like on the Facebook page, how they've seen their personality traits come out in different ways and how that's made them feel and how they've kind of dealt with that and maybe changed their perspective. Knowing their personality traits, like on their own self-awareness journeys. So that would be awesome.
Yeah. I'm just as you said that, it even reminded me, like, when you and I had our first business together, I don't know how long ago that was, 6 or 7 years ago now, when we first started the conversations about that new business. It was a cool business concept of everybody could get some coaching instead of just the people in the business that could afford it. It was like, let's give coaching to everybody and
for everyone.
Coaching for everyone. And we loved it. But I remember using the story a lot of how in my house, I was raised by a mom who was very much an artist and an introvert and someone who didn't push the envelope about things. And then my personality was just like an explosive, like, boom, let's go, just out there, loud and proud and risk taking. And I mean, that must have been super hard for my mother to deal with that. And I remember as I became a teenager and then an early adult, my mom and I used to get in some serious arguments, right? And I'm sure she just did not know how to control this person who was so much bigger in personality than she was. And so as a result, she used to try to use guilt and use these different tactics and techniques so that I wouldn't be as assertive. And she was doing it very well intentioned. So this is not a hit on her, right? But what happened is, as a result, when I was in my younger days and I was starting in the workforce, trying to get jobs and then being in jobs, is like, I had a very high level of assertiveness. And because that had been so pushed down at my house, I would almost push it out more. I would like be more that way. And then I would suffer the consequences of that in interacting with people. And I would, and when I say suffer the consequences, sometimes people would be taken aback by my strong nature, but oftentimes, if not always, I felt shame about my strong nature.
Yeah.
Right. And so as I developed over time, you and I started working together, and I really think a lot of my awareness about myself came through more and more as you and I talked more about this, and as we developed more and more things, and then I got into coaching and saw other people's experiences with it. And just as I developed, I got way more comfortable with that level of assertiveness. And now I'm so grateful that I have that. I'm so grateful that I have that level of risk and that I can be with people and I can use that assertiveness to help other people to
now
come out of their spaces.
Offering muffins to everybody.
But just the mini muffins, not those great big ones like that moment.
Yeah, it's like working with you on that and that company. It was awesome because we had our team was so mixed.
Oh, right. It was. Yeah.
And since we were in, the business of personalities, traits, and coaching, it was such a wonderful team to work in because we were all working on it together personally as we were developing a product that would help others, participate. So
I know. It was really fun.
Self-awareness on steroids or something.
I know, because it was not unusual for one of us to come in the office and the whiteboard had two sides. Remember that? And it would spin, it was a great big one.
The whiteboard over, like, now I got something else to share. And boom.
We'd have multiple color markers and arrows and circles, and we'd all be gathered around that just like it was a campfire in the middle of a 30 below winter day. Oh, anyway, to be continued. But yeah, my hypothesis about this is that personality traits are an excellent way for us to study ourselves and to begin the conversation about self-awareness. I think it's an excellent on-ramp. Yeah. And it's a really good way for us to be able to, knowing someone's personality traits, to help understand their self-awareness as well. Just in working with people too. So that's kind of my hypothesis.
Yeah. I would just encourage everybody, like take a personality test. It's fun and insightful. Yeah. And don't judge it. It just is. Exactly. Like, just accept it. It is you. They're in mine, and I think pretty much everyone else's experiences, that they're pretty accurate. Like when I read mine, it was like looking in a mirror. How did this survey of 50 questions turn into this perfect description of me?
There is and just to point people towards a couple of different options for them, because that's such a good suggestion, is to have people do assessments. There's a DISC, DISC. That's one assessment. There's also a Myers-Briggs.
The classic Myers-Briggs, yeah.
Yeah, both of those. I mean, there's over 1,500 assessments on the marketplace, and a lot of times people will charge you for them. But in both of those cases, you can find a variety of those online for free. And then also, we recently posted a blog posting called the Big Five Personality Traits, which is how all personality traits testing began back in the 30s.
Yeah, this is like the base research.
Yeah.
The general traits, yeah.
Yeah, the whole body of work. And so we recently posted a blog post on that, and there is a link to a really good article about that in that blog. And there's probably some testing that's in there as well. So just if people are interested, it is a fun thing to check out.
Yeah, it's a great resource. So go forth, get a personality test. Share emotion with somebody, get out of your comfort zone, and accept who you are. I'll wrap it
up. Talk again soon. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.